Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our sustainability information session. This is one of the second ones I think that we've done this year. We have quite a number left. But before we get started, let's just talk about a few housekeeping items. We do have attendees both in person and visiting on Zoom today. So if you are on Zoom, we are going to mute you throughout the presentation just so there's no disruptions. If you have any questions, please place them in the chat box and we'll address those at the end. We'll go ahead and ask the speaker any of your questions. If you're in person and you have a question, we'll address those at the end as well. When you ask your question, we'll ask you to come up to the podium and speak into the microphone so that everyone is able to hear you. A couple of really cool things we have happening here in the city. We have our Be Floridian Now program. So if you haven't heard about that, it's our fertilizer education campaign. So most of you know, since you're here at this presentation, that we are in the middle of a fertilizer ban for the summer. And as part of that, we want to make flamingos a symbol of a fertilizer-friendly lawn or fertilizer-free lawn. So as part of that, we are selling these flamingos and we're having residents decorate them and placing them in your yard. And as part of that as well, you can enter our flamingo decorating contest, and our mayor will choose first, second, and third place each month. So the June winner will be chosen here in just a few days. So make sure you get those entries in. First place will win rain barrels one rain barrel and Florida-friendly plants. Second and third place will also win Florida-friendly plants. We do have a few more information sessions coming up in the near future. We have one next Wednesday on June 30th. The FPL will be talking about their Solar Together program. So if you're an FPL customer, you can learn how to get involved with that program and how you can use solar energy at home without actually having it placed on your property. And we have the Lagoon report card update from Lisa Soto with the MRC. That'll be on July 22nd. So if you'd like to register for either of those events, you can do so at cityofcocoa-beach.com/sustainability. And lastly, the Sustainability Committee does support these sustainability information sessions, and they really helped move this forward for the city to be able to host these sessions. So if you would like to attend one of their meetings and talk to them about anything related to sustainability, they meet on the first Wednesday of every month at 6:30 p.m. here in the commission room. So I'm sure they would love to hear any comments or anything you want to talk about related to sustainability. So tonight we have Dr. Bonnie Wells here with the University of Florida IFAS Extension Office here in Brevard County. She's going to be discussing Florida-friendly fertilization, maintaining a beautiful landscape while protecting our natural resources. Dr. Bonnie Wells is a commercial horticulture agent for the University of Florida IFAS Extension in Brevard County, where she specializes in turf grass and ornamental production and sustainable landscape maintenance. She's a doctor of plant medicine with more than 15 years of experience in commercial plant production, with expertise in plant pathology, integrated pest management, and pesticide science and sustainability. So with that, I would like to welcome up Dr. Bonnie Wells.
Thank you. Let me see if I can do this. Mike. Okay, hello. First of all, I just want to say thank you very much for the invitation. I started my job in Brevard County in January of 2019. And since I've been here, I'll tell you that the landscapes and the natural resources in this county are two of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen. And so to have this discussion, I believe, is so important because there is a fine line between maintaining that beautiful landscape and doing our best to protect those natural resources like the Indian River Lagoon that we have here in the county.
I'm going to share your screen on Zoom. I don't think people at home can see your presentation.
Okay.
Give me just 1 second.
Sure.
Find my mouse.
Okay, great. All right, so today or tonight, we are going to follow the following agenda. So first thing I would like to do is just give you a little bit of introduction, introduce Florida-friendly landscaping and some of the environmental and economic concerns that we have in the state of Florida that would really help. Florida-friendly landscaping practices will help with these concerns. Particularly, we're going to be talking about fertilizers tonight. So I'm going to talk about some general fertilizer practices, both for our ornamental plants and our turf grass. So those do go hand in hand in our lawn. So we'll talk a little bit about each of those. So first of all, many of you have, I'm sure, have heard of Florida-friendly landscaping, or maybe even took some Florida-friendly landscaping classes at the Extension Center with Sally Scalera. She's been doing those classes for a while. It is an integrated approach to maintaining an attractive yard without having any sort of negative effect on the environment. And the key to Florida-friendly landscaping is really how you maintain your space. You know, you figure out how to maintain your space that you have and realize that your space does contribute to the bigger whole. And so the two main goals really are to conserve water and also to protect water quality. And so it's these 9 principles which make up Florida-friendly landscaping. So right plant, right place, watering efficiently, fertilizing appropriately is what we're going to talk about tonight, reducing stormwater runoff, managing landscape pests responsibly, providing for wildlife, mulching, recycling yard waste, and protecting the waterfront. And so water. We know we live in Florida, we're surrounded by water. It is one of Florida's greatest natural resources. And when we're talking about landscapes practices, misuse of fertilizers and pesticides are a big contributor to our water pollution. And on the that's really affects the water quality. And as far as the water quantity or conserving water, which watering and fertilizing goes hand in hand in our lawns, 60% of Florida's fresh water is used on our landscape irrigation. So this is why we kind of target Florida-friendly landscaping to help us with our be more environmentally sustainable with those practices, because it's the water in Florida and beyond that we are concerned with, both the quality and the quantity. And because we're talking about fertilizers, we're going to focus on the water quality. And so when we fertilize our landscapes, we can become one of the sources of non-point source pollution. And you might have heard this term. It's when you really can't pinpoint an exact place, or it's not like a fertilizer spill or maybe some sort of industrial plant that is producing pollution. It's kind of an accumulation of many different things. This can come from many different lawns, many different businesses, all types of things. So when we're talking about non-point source pollution, fertilizers will contribute to this if we overuse them or use them inappropriately. And so it's important to note that what happens, to this water that we are using on our lawn. So, water carries fertilizers and nitrogen and phosphorus. We'll talk more about that, but it's not going to be treated. So, our inside water is treated, but not our outside water. So what happens to that water that we are irrigating that has, that runs through our yards that might have soil and debris and, extra nutrients that we may not get? It's going to go, to our creeks, our ponds, our rivers, and ultimately the groundwater. So that's really what we're trying to avoid. And Florida's population, this is a UF study that believes that by 2060, the population is going to double. And that is going to put a strain on the demand for water. There's going to be more people, therefore there's going to be more pollution, decreased habitats that will filter this polluted runoff before it returns to the aquifer. So you can see in this, this map, it's showing you now, and then the red is showing you the double growth. So it's something we are concerned about. So what can we do now to help us protect the future? And also economically, if you think about the tourism and the fishing industry in Florida, it is, based on our water. It's based on our beaches, our tourism, our fishing industry in Florida. So any decrease in those natural ecosystems can decrease the economic impact of tourism to the state. So there's many different ways here that it could hurt us if we are hurting our natural resources. So what can we do? So one easy thing that you can do that has a lot of impact is to follow Florida-friendly landscaping principles. It's that easy. And we have at the Extension Office, we have all the resources you could possibly need to learn how to do this, all aspects of it. And so we're going to continue with fertilizing. So that's the number 3 of the 9 principles of Florida-friendly, and it's absolutely one of the most important ones as far as water quality and protecting the natural resources. But we fertilize, and we do that for a very good reason. We want plants to grow, right? So plants require nutrients for growth. Those needs are really dependent on the type of plant it is, the age of the plant, maybe the soil qualities, the location and the time of year it is. It could depend on the pH, the soil type, and all of that stuff. So we do it for a reason. It's not a bad thing. We just have to make sure that we're doing it appropriately. We want beautiful landscapes. Fertilization is absolutely a part of that. And so when we're talking about fertilizers, they're made up of predominantly nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, your NPK. And when we're talking about nitrogen, it's that nitrate that plants can easily take up. It's also very mobile, and it will move through the water, easily moves with water, so therefore it can leach, it can run off. And when it's applied correctly, plants will take it up, and that's what we aim for. But when it's applied incorrectly, those nutrients can leach into the groundwater or run off into our water bodies. Phosphorus is also a concern, right? So nitrogen and phosphorus are our main concerns. That is because the excess nitrogen and phosphorus can lead to algae blooms, okay? And then that can lead to blocked sunlight of the water, so that would kill off certain plants under there. Low dissolved oxygen can kill fish. It can just do all kinds of bad things, and also health reasons. So we know that I'm by no means an expert in any sort of medical field or anything, but we know that they can cause respiratory problems and that sort of thing. And it's, nobody wants to swim in that. So it's just not a good thing. Potassium isn't really a concern as the other. It's not the one that we're really focused on. It doesn't really cause too much pollution. So problems with over-fertilizing also include that the plants that you are fertilizing, it can stimulate excessive growth of those plants, which you think is going to be good, but it's going to aggravate your pest problems. It's going to cause those plants to have more frequent watering, which are going to be wasting more water. You're going to have more, you probably start to use pesticides to prevent those pest problems that are increasing. And you can also have foliage burn. So there's many reasons not to over fertilize, the way that your landscape looks to the pollution in the environment. So proper fertilizer practices. So one of the most important things, and this is the same when I teach pesticide classes, is the label. That label has all the information on there that you need to be able to use that properly, understand what you're using, make sure you're using something that is safe, and we'll talk more about that. You want to make sure you're just storing your unused fertilizer in a dry area. And so you never want to fertilize within 15 feet of any water body. Now that's special to Brevard County. So what I have found is Brevard County's ordinances and local ordinances are a little bit stricter than most, which is good. So for the state, it's mostly 10 feet, but Brevard County, we take it a little bit higher than that with 15 feet of any water body and using a deflector shield. And we'll talk more about those ordinances in a minute. Spilled fertilizer can be a major source of pollution. So you never want to leave fertilizer on any sort of impervious surface like the concrete. Water is just going to wash that right down there into the storm drain. Another important thing is if you are establishing a new lawn with sod, you will not fertilize that lawn, that new sod, for at least 30 to 60 days. And that's because before you purchase that sod, it was fertilized. so that it has all the nutrients it needs for up to 60 days. So and its root system is very small. It does not, it's just gonna, if you put anything on there, it's just gonna leach right down or run off. So new sod, do not fertilize at all. And make sure you sweep up those fertilizer granules that may spill. So when to apply fertilizer? So those considerations really should be the time of year, what's the climate like, what's your soil type like, what species of grass are you growing? Most often it's going to be St. Augustine grass, but there's some others. Is it healthy? Is it in drought? You want to avoid, any sort of applications when drought, because it's not going to take it up. And only fertilize your lawn when it's actively growing, with restrictions, of course. So we know it's actively growing in the summer, but we're not supposed to be fertilizing now. But don't fertilize it in the winter when it's cold and it's not going to take it up, because it's just going to leach right down or run straight off. So, and always avoid fertilization if heavy rain is expected from 24 to 36 hours. And before fertilizing, so you always need to do these things. So before you fertilize, make sure you check your local ordinances. Consider, do your plants really need the fertilizer? And that could be based off of a soil analysis. It's very important. So you really need to make these assessments. Just don't go out and buy fertilizer to apply it. Make sure you're doing it correctly, legally, and that you're really doing it for a reason, that it needs it. And so those local ordinances, many counties, and municipalities have ordinances limiting fertilizer applications. So you need to really check your code for what that is. So for Brevard County, we know we're in that ban right now. So it's the rainy season. We don't want to put any fertilizer that has, anything like nitrogen or phosphorus in it in this till the end of September. September the 30th is when that ends. There's other things in that ordinance. We can talk more about these. So use the use of deflector shields when you're using broadcast spreaders, impervious surfaces. So again, just as we mentioned before, you don't want any of those granules or fertilizers to remain on those surfaces so that they can contaminate the environment. Spills and misuse happens. You just need to be able to respond to it appropriately. So, learn those types of things. And grass clippings. So grass clippings are a great source of nitrogen and phosphorus. So leave them on your lawn. Do not let them go into the street or on the edge. That's just going to be washed down with rain, water, right into the storm drain. So do not do that. Keep those grass clippings on there. And before I go any further, so we are in that fertilizer ban. What can you do? What can you do to help your lawn stay healthy? So, this would be a good time probably to do a soil test. Hopefully, maybe in April, we'll talk more about this when we're talking about using fertilizers that, you used a slow release fertilizer, by April. That way your yard's gonna have slowly released nitrogen throughout the summer where those plants can take it up and take it up only. None will be lost to the environment. There are some micronutrients that can be added. So potassium can be added as well as things like iron. But a full test should dictate that. Always be sure. So that's what I would say. Just hold off on fertilizing at all. And, if there's a problem, try to figure out what it is. So when that ban does end, that you can attend to it appropriately and correctly based on that test. All right, so first ask yourself, do my plants need to be fertilized? Well, if you are satisfied with the way that plant looks, do not feel that you have to do it just because it's part of the program or your neighbor's doing it or something. If it looks good to you, don't worry about it. And then you have to really solve any sort of primary problems. Remember that all goes back, all of these 9 principles of Florida-Friendly are wrapped together. Right plant, right place. Say if you put the wrong plant in the wrong place, then you're going to have all kinds of problems that are going to happen. You may think it needs fertilizer, and that's not the case. So you really need to solve any sort of other primary problems that it may have before you believe that it's a fertilizer and that it needs to be fertilized. Get to know the difference between a nutrient deficiency and say a pathogenic or pest problem, such as a bacteria or a fungus problem. So nutrient deficiencies are usually symmetrical. You'll see them on most all plants, whereas diseases are usually more random on the leaves. And this is showing you chlorosis on a leaf. That is a classic example of a nutrient deficiency where you might see spots for diseases, but don't go strictly by that, because there are some fertilizer nutrient issues that will cause spots as well, but usually they're symmetrical, and with diseases they're more random. And then learn which plants are prone to specific deficiency. So palm trees in Florida are the classic example of this. We typically have high pH soils, sandy soils. So these palm trees, they need a lot of fertilizer, or they tend to show a lot of fertilizer deficiency. So that's going to happen. It's just the way it is. So just be, cognizant of that, and know what your plant's supposed to look like so that you can tell when there's really an issue. So it's really getting to know all of these principles together so that you can fertilize appropriately. We cannot stress enough how important a soil test is. You should always get a soil test before you apply any sort of fertilizer. We can help you with that at the extension office. I go out a lot of times. I work with a lot of HOAs, a lot of different places, commercial businesses that we do a lot. You can even do this for homeowners. Sally Scalera is our residential horticulture agent. She does my Brevard yard. She does this a lot. Same basic facts here I do with the commercial industry and the HOAs and that type of thing. And so when you do this, you just want to make sure that you get a random sample and you multiple areas in the yard, and you mix it together so you're getting a good sample representing that whole area. And again, too much fertilizer in the soil can damage plants in the environment. We've got that foliage burn we've talked about. It can cause them to have a leggy appearance. And then that excessive leaf growth that you're going to get from putting too much nitrogen out is going to attract sap-sucking insects, foliage feeders like aphids and other insects. So just be aware of that. And then selecting a fertilizer. So we have both dry fertilizers and liquids, right? So dry are soil applied. They have to be watered in most of the time. Liquids can be mixed with water, and they also can be soil or foliage applied. So consider what, it may be that you need, which formulation that you may need or might work best for you. So this is what a typical fertilizer might look like. So the first number, of course, is your nitrogen. The next is your phosphorus, and then your potassium. So in Brevard County, we don't use fertilizers with phosphorus. Some will allow you to use a little bit of phosphorus, but it's, that's not here. We don't need to use any phosphorus at all. So these macronutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, are needed by the plant in relatively large quantities. And other micronutrients are like calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. And so plant needs them. So a lot of these plants that we're growing are going to need some supplemental fertilizer to look their best. The nitrogen, this makes a leafy vegetative production, encourages new growth, gives it green color. Phosphorus really helps form healthy roots and stems. It promotes flowering and fruit production and seed. And potassium promotes overall plant vigor, helps with disease resistance and also root development. So it is like good for the immune system of the plant. So just like us, we need potassium to help fight colds, things like that. So do plants. So it's a very important one. And micronutrients. Some of these are just as important as the macronutrients. They're just needed in smaller amounts. So boron, chlorine, copper, iron, manganese, and so on. They may be required. This is something they can do on a soil test and figure that out for you as well. Give you recommendations. Okay, so slow release fertilizers, super important, okay? These are also called controlled release fertilizers. They will distribute nutrients to plants slowly over time. This will decrease runoff and waste. So, it's not like you're just putting out a bunch and hoping the plant takes up as much as it can and the rest just goes down. This is going to slowly give a little bit over time where the plant is going to take it up. Less frequent fertilizer applications, will be necessary. And in Brevard County, it is required for us to have pick that's got 50% slow release nitrogen. And so organic versus inorganic, let's talk about that a little bit. So we have organic fertilizers, right? These are fertilizers that are derived from plants and animals. These would be your compost, manure, blood bone meal, fish emulsions. These act very slow release as well. They can include high levels of phosphorus, however, and they can have some possible safety concerns as far as like if we're using manure that hasn't been treated well. So they can be some problems. Overall, they're good for building up the soil. So you really need to be thinking about these. These are slower release. You build up the soil, whereas our inorganic fertilizers, the ones that have been synthesized from non-living materials, tend to have higher levels of nitrogen and phosphorus, but which makes it readily available. The plant's going to get a big boost, but chances are there's going to be more released. It's not going to really. When I hear Sally Scalera, who's so good at this, I hear her always talk about building up the soil, right? You want to build up the soil. You don't want to just feed the plant. You can build up the soil, maybe with some organic fertilizers. It's going to be better than just trying to feed that plant with some inorganic fertilizer that just goes away. It doesn't really do anything for, ecosystem services at all. So if you do use one of these, and there's lots out there and we do use them, choose one with some or all of the nutrients in a slow or controlled released form. And when plants take it up, they don't know the difference. It's still the same nutrient. It's just how much is in there. And, and if you're actually building up the soil or just feeding the plant and losing the rest. So just consider these things. And if an organic could be better for you, it might be, just consider that. So phosphorus and nitrogen cause the largest problems for water pollution. And our soils are naturally high in phosphorus. So you really want to choose the Florida-friendly ways for fertilizing is choose low to no phosphorus. Brevard County, let's choose no phosphorus. Okay, so let's try to just not use that. We have naturally high levels of phosphorus and we won't really need to use too much of that. Some crops now you can do that based on soil tests, but not our laws. So let's avoid phosphorus. And also avoid weed and feed. So this seems, a convenience thing. People love to do things more efficiently, but this is not one of those things you want to do. So products that contain herbicides and fertilizers together, they're getting it all wrong. So the timing of the application might not be the same. So typically we want to use like herbicides before fertilizer, just the timing is like that. You're broadcasting herbicide all over, and that's not Florida friendly. We spot treat, if there's a problem with weeds, you really want to treat them by spot treatment, not a broad application. So totally avoid weed and feed. We do not recommend those. Just stay away. All right, so now let's end. Well, we're getting towards the end. We're going to talk about landscape plants a little bit, and then we're going to talk about turf grass. We think about them together in our lawn, but they're a little bit different as far as the need. So again, if you remember that right plant, right place, all of these principles are tied together and they really should be used as an integrated approach. So right plant, right place, make sure that you plant that plant where it's going to grow well, it's going to have less to maintain. If you put it in the wrong place, it's going to show some deficiencies. You want to consider soil pH. Be sure part of that soil test that you'll get from UF, if you get one, will have the pH reading. Always install plants according to those pH requirements, because there's no use trying to get something to grow where it's just not going to be, happy. And so altering pH, you can do it, but it's not always ideal. It's almost like figure out your profile of your soil, figure out what it'll take, and then work around that with as far as what will grow well there. If if you try to alter the pH, sometimes it's going to hurt the environment more than it is just going with what you have. That's probably the most important thing. So ornamental plants, once they are established, many of them won't even require fertilizer. And that's especially true if you fertilize your lawn, because that fertilizer on your lawn is going to be able to reach the roots of the plants nearby. So that they may already have enough nutrients from your lawn fertilizers. And again, if your plants look healthy, you may not need to fertilize anyway. All right, so turf grass. So we all want a healthy lawn. Healthy lawns are good for a lot of different reasons. And you can consider a healthy lawn as receiving the appropriate level of fertilizer. So fertilizers aren't all bad. You know, we want a healthy lawn. We just want to use it appropriately. There are lots of benefits. So turf is an awesome filter for runoff. So if you have a really healthy, established lawn, that can help as a filter of some of these things. So it'll help stabilize the soil, reduces any sort of ambient air temperature. So may require fewer cultural or chemical controls for weeds, insects, and diseases. So it is important to make sure that you have a healthy lawn, and fertilizers will be a part of that. And so also mowing. So mowing is very important for maintaining a healthy lawn as well. Most of us have St. Augustine grass. We may have some zoysia grass, and just be sure that you're mowing them at the recommended height. We have those resources for you if you're not aware of that. Never remove more than 1/3 of the leaf blade at a time. Leave those grass clippings on the lawn, and don't mow the lawn when it's wet. It's going to stress it. You don't want to do that. And you also don't want to cause any sort of extra issues as far as diseases and that sort of thing. Keep mower blades sharp, and routinely monitor your irrigation system. So water and fertilizing goes hand in hand. Be sure that you are looking at all of those things as well. And as far as irrigating, just a note is that you want to water, you want to avoid watering in the heat of the day. And depending on where you are, and it's different places, but usually about once a week is good. You can usually do it 2 times a week, depending on if you're a homeowner, which house number you have, or if you're commercial property, you have 2 days as well. And yeah, you want to do about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of water per event. And so you want to look for fertilizers with a high % of slow release nitrogen. And so this is 30%, but in Brevard County, again, we raised the standard. We're good at that. So this is really over 50%. So this is, you're in Brevard County, you need to be looking for 50% slow release nitrogen. And always use, 0 phosphorus. And that's what we're aiming for. So over 50% soluble nitrogen and 0 phosphorus. Correct time to fertilize really depends on the location in the state, the type of grass, and the level of your desired maintenance. Generally April and some October, with the potential for slow release in the summer months. So if you use a slow release in April, it should help your lawn maintain health throughout the summer without having to put any other fertilizer on your lawn. And so how often? So depending on type of grass and where you are in the state, general rule of thumb is, for St. Augustine grass would be, 2 to 3 times a year in North to Central Florida, and then a little bit more if you're down south, and so on, as you see with the other ones. And you also must use a broadcast spreader with a deflector shield. Okay, so that's very important. You want to calibrate properly to ensure even coverage. And I was just thinking just now too, I should have mentioned the Green Industries Best Management Program that I'm highly involved with as far as the landscape professionals. This mirrors exactly what they learn and they follow to be able to get that certificate, which will allow them to get their fertilizer license. Because if you are a commercial applicator of fertilizer, it is required that you have a license to do that. And in order to get a license, you have to take the Green Industries Best Management Practices class, which covers all of this and more in detail. So this applies for our professional landscapers as well. Think about that spreader. Make sure it's clean. You want to remove those fertilizer granules. Now, I'm just going to repeat myself, but it's so important. Any granules left on the sidewalk is going to increase that potential for runoff. So very important, easy way to mitigate that. And then watering in fertilizer. So fertilizers need to be watered in, but you don't want to use too much water. You want to make sure that you're keeping it within that root zone. So typical rule of thumb is no more than a 1/4 of an inch of water. Too much would wash it way past. And you can perform a catch can test. And this is what Sally does when she goes around to my Brevard yard sites. She will calibrate your landscape, your irrigation to see how much it's putting out. So that's very important. All right, so in summary, know your fertilizer ordinance. Never use fertilizer within 15 feet of a water body. So that's specific for Brevard County. There could be some other counties. Most of them are 10. Always test your soil before adding any amendments. Do not fertilize before a heavy rain. Use slow release fertilizers, right, that contain 50% soluble nitrogen. And then use fertilizers with low or no in Brevard County phosphorus. And always follow all safety and application instructions on the package. So just as it's important for our pesticide applicators to read the label and follow it, it's just as important for the fertilizer applicator. So be sure you know your fertilizer before any type of application. And I think I went kind of fast, but I'll end it with that. This is my contact information. Email is the best way to get in touch with me if you have any questions. I am on Twitter. So if you're on there, please give me a follow. I'll follow you back. I love to post things about Brevard County. So look for me there. And I guess I'll take any questions now.
Okay. We actually do have quite a few questions.
Okay.
So let's just start with, I think you briefly touched on this. Someone online asked this question. Are local lawn services and landscaping companies on board with the Florida-Friendly program? And is there any conflict of interest since they, provide the service and sell the fertilizers?
Mm-hmm. So yes, they are. So I did mention the GIBMP program, which is a partner with the Florida-Friendly Landscaping program. It does come out. What's interesting is we have a new program for professional landscapers called the Florida-Friendly Professional Landscaper Program. So you can become, if you are a for hire contracted landscape company, you can, if you have individuals that want to become Florida-Friendly certified, they have to go through 3 online trainings that would cover a lot of the same type of things, all the Florida-Friendly principles. And then they would do a field module. They would just contact the extension office after they did their online training. And then we would go through some kind of hands-on type things. And then you become a Florida-Friendly certified professional. And I believe since this has sort of started in last year, it's been kind of slow to get recognized. I would think there is probably 30 or so in the state. And we can have I did have a Zoom last year information on that. So be looking at that. If you are a landscaper and you're, want to get on board with Florida-Friendly Landscaping, there's a program just for you. So absolutely the professional landscapers are on their radar.
Okay. The next question is, so you talked a lot about dealing with, personal properties and people's lawns, but how do we get condos and hotels interested in applying these?
Yes. So that is my job. I am the commercial horticulture agent, and this year I have probably visited 15 already condos, their homeowner associations from Titusville all the way down to Palm Bay, who want to do better. They don't know, they do have contracts with landscapers. They want to know, they get a soil test, they want to know what they can do. And then I actually sit down after we do analysis and we talk to the contractor. So they are, and I think it's just going to be better communication, that there is this service out here that will help you. So a lot of people think homeowners, that's, we have that. There's also the commercial side, and that's where the homeowner associations, the businesses, that sort of thing would fall. So there's many programs out there and they're growing. So yes, just gonna take better communication, I think.
Thank you.
Mhm.
There are quite a few questions about soil tests and
Okay.
soil analysis. So I know you mentioned that you do soil tests.
Mhm.
Are there any other companies that do soil tests that you know of? And then also, what are you looking for in a soil test?
Okay, so there are other private companies out there that do that, but we don't recommend that. We recommend that you do University of Florida. You know, we're not trying to sell you any sort of amount of fertilizer. We are wanting you to be more sustainable. So our soil test will, look at, it'll give you pretty much a recommendation on everything but nitrogen. Nitrogen is not one, it's so mobile that that's based on the recommendation of whatever the plant that you're growing, what type of grass you're growing. We can give you, depending on your soil, it is a little different for some things, but potassium, micronutrients, all of that, and it'll give you a great recommendation. So those tests are $10 a piece. Sometimes if you have a really large area, we might need to do a couple, depending on how big it is. But within 7 days, you will have a complete profile of your soils, nutrient levels, except the nitrogen. They'll give you a recommendation based on what the literature says for that. But for the rest of it, it'll give you pH and all the macronutrients and the micronutrients that they could test according to that pH.
And then the last question relating to that is, are there any take-home kits for soil tests that you can purchase and test your own soil?
There are, and I have never used them. They're going to be limited on what they can do. I'm not so sure you can get all the buffers. And this is soil science is not really my forte. It's all very complex, but there's different buffers they use to be able to extract these nutrients. And that might not be so readily available. Just there's going to be a limited what you can test, but there are available for just the basics, I'm sure.
Awesome. We're going to move to kind of a different topic. So many people in Cocoa Beach have reclaimed water.
Mhm.
So there's a question that's asking, do we still need to fertilize with reclaimed water? How does fertilizing change?
Right. So that's a good question. All I really know is that the potential for more runoff or more, it's going to have more nutrients in the reclaimed water. It's going to be saltier. It's going to have more nutrients in it. So you could probably fertilize less, and you just have to be careful because you don't want to burn your foliage or that sort of thing. So yes, you would probably minimize your fertilization if you were using reclaimed water. That's the idea anyway. I know things aren't always as they expect to be. So, but that's generally the rule, is you would fertilize less if you had reclaimed water.
Okay. Also kind of relating to that, when is the best time to water the lawn? Like time of day?
Like time of day.
Yeah.
So avoid like 10 to 4 during the heat. Most of that's going to evaporate. So you want to do it early in the morning. So that way, if you want to minimize the dew, the wetness on your leaves. That's going to contribute to diseases and that sort of thing. So the best time is in the morning before the sun comes up if possible. And, avoid 10 to 4 when it's really hot, because most of that water is just going to be evaporate anyway, and it's not helping your plant. So you're just a futile attempt.
Okay, awesome. Is it ever appropriate to fertilize during the summer month bands, or are there any like natural fertilizers that can be used during that time?
Well, as long as it doesn't have nitrogen and phosphorus, yes. But I mean, technically, we avoid it because it's the rainy season. If it wasn't and we weren't worried about this, then it'd be a great time to fertilize. But because we're worried about pollution and over, leaching and runoff, we are going to avoid it during the rainy season. Micronutrients are probably the best to add. I mean, it's not that long. It's really not that long. If you use your slow release nitrogen in April, you should be fine. Maybe some, like, I know iron can be added to green it up. Potassium's good if it's struggling, that sort of thing. But other than that, I can't think of anything specific that I would recommend except just waiting it out. That's probably the best thing.
Okay. And so you've mentioned a lot of the restrictions in Brevard County. So are the fertilizer suppliers, like the big box stores, are they on board with this? Do they have signs or pull things off their shelves, or how do they handle this?
I believe you can still buy it, so they're not going to pull it off the shelf. It's not illegal to sell it, it's just illegal to use it. So, they're not going to modify their marketing of it, but they are aware of it. They do, some places do give out, pamphlets that say, don't use it, we're under fertilizer restrictions, that sort of thing. In my experiences, even with the landscape companies, and if I've reviewed their contracts with different homeowner association contracts, they're absolutely on board. I have not run across yet of anyone that is not following those restrictions.
Okay. And then kind of going along with that, when you're shopping for fertilizer, I think this is a common question, like how do you read the label? What are you looking for? Where on the bag do you look?
That's a great question. There's a lot of information. So, it's just really that NPK, and then it should tell you under there, what percent, if it's slow release or not, or if, what type of nitrogen it is, that sort of thing. So it should be clear. I know it's a lot of information. It's just like a pesticide label. Some things are just like, what, but if you need help with that at the extension office, we are absolutely willing to help you. You can bring it in, you can send us an email, even give us a call. We'll help you go through that because, it's not always as clear as it could be.
Questions keep rolling in. Is there a certification for hotels so that we can recognize that they're Florida friendly?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I did a few of, Trinity Towers down in Melbourne, they just got theirs for all 3 of their condos. So it's just like the homeowners one, I'll come out with a checklist and make sure they're checking all of these things, mainly that you're following all of these things. You have a rain shut-off valve on your irrigation. And, just sometimes we have to modify it. Most of the times you'll go and you'll see things that need to be fixed. We'll work with them, they'll fix it. And then, it's a no cost thing. You get a sign and they list it on a registry and like a little certificate. So it's really nice. It really shows that you're doing all that you can to protect our, our natural resources like the Indian River Lagoon, and all of our water. So absolutely, that's part of my job. And I've been super happy to be able to do that. And I'm finding that this year, and I don't know if it's because of, people being at home more last year or what, but I have gotten so many calls for either commercial Florida-friendly landscaping assessments or, just for general, what can I do to be more sustainable? So I think it's really going in the right direction. It's just going to take communications. I think the more you talk to one association or condo, then they talk to the next one, and then they know it's a thing. So I really feel it ramping up. So I think that's really exciting.
That is really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Someone also asked that you mentioned pamphlets. Are there any pamphlets available that they could bring to local suppliers, or are these pamphlets already available at the local suppliers?
So I think I've seen some local suppliers that have them, and I can't think of specifically who I have. I could actually find that, if you're interested in something like that, we could, provide that. But from what I've seen, there are actually some, that have made up their own little pamphlets. So University of Florida has all kinds of resources, so we could surely find you that. If not, we can create it for you. So for whatever reason that you would need that, if you're a company that's trying to do better and still selling fertilizers, we can help you with those pamphlets, no problem.
Okay. I guess kind of going along with that as well, someone asked, do you all charge for your services? I know you mentioned the soil test does cost about $10, but other services do you charge for those as well?
Yeah, so some services we do charge for. So if I don't charge for site visits, like if you're commercial property, this is the same. Well, I'll speak for myself. So commercial properties, if it's just a site visit and you want to problem solve, talk about something, I charge nothing. If you want a soil sample and to test your irrigation water, we normally charge a $50 flat rate. That way we'll come out, take the soil sample for you, mail it off, and that's really the bulk of the cost is the overnight shipping that we do. So the soils, or we'll provide the paperwork and how to do it and say, hey, if you want to just pay $10 and send it off, then I wouldn't charge anything. The only time I ever charge for a site visit is I'm actually the one having to go take the sample and then mail it off. So, and then I know Sally, who does my Brevard yard, hers are $50 as well. She does a little bit more intense than I do at this point. So it's well worth the $50.
Okay. Are there any more questions?
I have one.
Can you come speak into the microphone? Just come up here to the podium.
In my yard in Cocoa Beach, when doing a soil sample, I noticed in my yard at the top, it's real dark and rich and organic. And then as I go down, the strata changes and then it becomes less organic and then it becomes shelly.
Mhm.
So like how deep do you go to with your soil sample?
Soil sample. So our probes usually are about 6 inches or more. We'll go down. Yeah, it's about 6 inches, I guess. Maybe 8. So it's just one of those probes. I'd say 6 to 8 inches is how we go down. Mhm. And then we go around the whole perimeter and mix it together so that we get a good area, good random sample of the whole thing. But most of your, most of the nutrients, things are going to be in that a foot or less in that area. So mostly around the roots is where you're going to find most of it. So it works out right.
And then it doesn't look like there's any more questions. So there's just one wrap-up question here.
Okay.
I think this is a good last question.
Okay.
Do you have other talks or anything coming up about the other portions of the Florida-Friendly program, or how can people find out more?
That is great. And if you want me to come talk, I am happy. Invite me. You see my email right there. I don't have anything scheduled at this time, but things change every day. I do, go around to homeowners associations and some evenings and I give talks. I just gave one in Cape Canaveral over, the general Florida-friendly presentation. And so I'll continue to do educational workshops with them. And I would offer that to any other, commercial business, including homeowners associations that would like that. So if you are interested in that, shoot me an email and I'll absolutely do it. And of course, I'll just mention again that certified professional Florida-friendly landscaping program. I went through that program myself, so I'm certified and I am able to teach that. So there's not many of us in the state that are certified yet to do that. So it's a good opportunity. If you are a landscaper and you want to become Florida-friendly certified, contact me and we can get you to go through that program as well.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you. I think that's all the questions that we have.
Okay.
Thank you so
Well,
much for
thank you.
coming.
I
up
appreciate it.
today. Yes. Great. We'll turn this off. Yep.
Yeah, before I beat.
You're muted, so you should go.
There.